Hello. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate the techniques that you need to complete labs 10 to 13. And I'm going to start, even though lab 9, I think it was, covered the user frame creation, I'm going to start with user frame creation because it's such an integral part of lab 10 to 13, particularly lab 13, where you create the shape program. So I'm just going to start up the Teach Pennant. And so right now, the robot, before I do anything with a robot and starting a new program or a new frame or anything, I want to make sure it's in a neutral position. So when you first start out, click the position button. And what you want is to have most of the joints pretty close to 0, except for joint 5, which should be close to 90 degrees, which means that the pointer would be pointing straight down. So I'm just going to make a few adjustments here. I need to turn on the Teach Pennant and bring the speed down a little bit so I can control it better. And get joint 1 a little closer to 0. That's good enough. Joint 2. Joint 3. Joint 4. Whoops, I went a little too far there. And joint 5 is pretty good. It's about minus 80, which is close enough to minus 90, so I'm going to leave it where it is. And joint 6 is the other one. This is the most important one because it's impossible to tell by looking at the robot what the angle of joint 6 is. And if it's twisted too far out, sometimes if you've been using the robot, it can end up twisted almost 360 degrees from its neutral position. And what will happen is when you try to do a move, you might run into an axis limit because it's trying to move and it can't move joint 6 any further. All right, so that's pretty close to a neutral position. So what I'm going to do now is go to the menu and I'm going to set up user frame, set up frames. Oh, it looks like it's defaulting to user frame. Normally it defaults to the tool frame window. And if that happens, you just click other and then user frame. Okay. So I'm going to use user frame 1, just hit enter. And here are my 3 points. So my origin, I'm going to put my origin here at this corner. This is going to be the X direction, and then that's going to be the Y direction. So with Roboguide, it's very important to use, it's very hard to tell with your eye where the tool center point really is. So we're going to have to do a couple of things. One of which is, if you haven't already done it, the pointer tool, if you double click it, you should make it mostly transparent so that you can see through it. That way you're going to be able to see the tool center point even if you're looking from the top of the robot. The robot also, if you double click the robot body, there's a transparency setting for that as well. So that's going to help you be able to always see where the tool center point is when you're doing your frame or programming or whatever. So the next thing is to get roughly positioned above, and then up here, these are the orthogonal views for Roboguide. I'm going to use the top view, and what it does is it straightens out the robot. So I'm looking at it exactly from the top view. So the Z coordinate is not really having any effect. I'm only going to be looking at X and Y. Now I've just done this and I want to be able to slide this over. The key combination for that is Control right drag. That's going to be very useful. Control right drag and then zooming in and out with the roll bar on the mouse. So what I'm going to do is position myself over this corner, which is the origin point. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit first and slow the speed way down. And I want to go to world jogging. So right now I'm in coordinate. I'm going to click until it says world. And so I want to go, this is my positive Y direction. Positive X direction. And then I can knock the speed down to fine. And then down to very fine. And that is right on the point. That's as close as I can get. So now that's, remember, that's just in the X and Y direction. So if I zoom out, now I have to come in from the side. And so I'm going to choose a side view. And I'm going to bring this down in the Z direction. So I've got to speed up quite a bit. Okay, I'm pretty close. Now I'm going to zoom in, bring the speed down. Oops. Oops. And then go down to fine. And that's good. I'm going to have it just a little bit above the shape, only because if I put it too far in, it won't be visible when it traces the path in the program. All right, so that is my my origin. And so I just click Shift, Record. And now I can move on to the X direction point. So I'm going to go back to the top view and pick the orthogonal view one more time. And now I'm going to jog over to this point here, and that'll be my X direction. Okay, zoom in. Bring it down to a slower speed. All right, go down to very fine. And that's as close as I'm going to get. Oh, about that. Okay. Now, I don't have to deal with the Z direction because I already had brought this down, and these points are all in the same plane. So I'm all set then to record the Y direction point. Sorry, X direction point. All right, now I've got to move to this opposite corner over here. Again, top view. Bring the speed up. Zoom in. Bring the speed way down. Zoom in a little bit more. All right, that's as close as I'm going to get. And that is going to be my Y direction point. Okay, so I've got a user frame recorded. So to test the user frame, I have to do two things. The first thing, whoops, what I'm going to do first is move to the origin. So that's the origin point. And I need to set the user frame. So shift coordinate, and it says user frame 2. That needs to be user frame 1 because that's the number of the user frame I was in. The second thing I have to do is click coordinate until it says user. Okay, so that is now using the frame I just created. So when I jog in the X direction, it should now be following along the edges of the square. And same thing with the Y direction. And I also want to make sure Z goes up. Okay, so that's the creation of the user frame. I'm going to stop here, and as a next video, we'll get into the creating the shapes program.